Good afternoon. We are now discussing about sampling, data analysis, and reporting mechanisms for engineering students. So here, the presentation includes the broad aspects of qualitative and quantitative research. Then we can see about how we can choose a sample. Then what are the analysis methods, how we can analyze the data. And finally, we can see about the reports. Before going to that, first we can see about the basic difference between qualitative and quantitative research. When we see about data analysis, we have quantitative data and qualitative data. The quantitative data focuses on the statistical analysis. The data depends on counting. Okay, so you can count the number of samples you have, and it depends on the frequency, how frequently you can use those data. And then we can have qualitative data. Qualitative data basically focus on the theory. So you are building the theories. You can give some of the coding for your sample analysis. And finally, you can use combination of the two. Some of the data need quantitative and another one may need these qualitative data. Either you can use qualitative or quantitative data. That depends on the research questions. In order to do your analysis, in order to do your title research, first you have to give research questions that addresses your title, your proposals. Then you can use which kind of philosophy you are using for research. Then you can use some of the skills, methods, analysis, which you can use your analysis. When we see the principle of research design, we have four main features. The first one is those depends upon the assumption in the reality, okay? The assumption in the reality. When we see about the ontology, that depends on, we have the world in the big pictures, and we have the assumptions. So how you are assuming the nature of the world and the reality, the nature of the nature of the world and the reality. How you are assuming as a researcher point of view. When you say about epistemology, that depends on what are the best assumptions for the reality or for the real world about you are giving. So that depends on. In the case of ontology, you have assumptions between world and the reality, but in the case of epistemology, we are using the best assumptions. How close you are going to those aspects. When we come to the methodology means you are grouping your problems in terms of either ontology or epistemology. Then that coherently give you a picture about your work. And based on that, you have different methods. Those methods analyzes how you can collect your data and what kind of investigations you are using on those principles. When we see about the case of constructing our reality. So in this case, we have summary, truths, and facts, which we are checking for different concepts when we come to the research case. In the case of truths, as realisms, researchers are saying that there is only a single truth for research. But when we come to the internal realisms, okay, There is truth exists, but that truth depends on obscure whenever you are looking on your proposals, your research. When we come to the relativisms, they are saying that, okay, there are many truths. And when we come to the nominalisms, they say that there is no truth. When you pick a title for research, for proposals, either your proposals in this either realisms or relativisms or nominalism. So you can check based on the facts, how your research works on case. So when you talk about, for instance, nominalisms, they are saying that we focus on the facts. We focus on the facts, so that facts are giving us the truth which we are working on those aspects. Okay. So when we see about epistemology, that depends on the positivisms and the social constructionisms. That means when we talk about the positivists, they are thinking about the best way to investigate the world is through objective methods. And say about observations. That observation objective leads to you to the ontology. Ontology, that means we are talking about the reality and the assumptions which you are when we say about social structure, the reality that does exist by itself. In this case, you have to construct some theories. Some people construct those things and they focus on this and the thoughts itself. So you focus on those points for your case. There are different methodologies, so those methodologies that depends on its combination, or it can use some of the implications from epistemology and ontology. So whenever we are talking about the reality in the world, how you are looking at the reality, and which theories, which principles you are using to come up or to build those tasks. Whenever you are, gathering the data, either qualitative or quantitatives, or you are mixing those methods and approaches, either you are using some external, internal approach, you can use those methods for your analysis case. Okay. So whenever we are choosing the approach, which approach are you going to use for your data? So whenever we are choosing the approach, either qualitative or quantitative approach cases, so that depends on your experiences, organization experiences, or right or not wrong method. So in this case, the first one is, which analysis are you going to use? Are you going to use quantitative or qualitative analysis? That depends on individual or on company level or whatever. The second one is, are you going to use universal theory or truth or local knowledge in order to analysis? Which cases you are using? That is basic. That means, is your results are you going to your result as a general result, or is that the result could be applicable, or you are using some of the local factors for your studies? እዚህ ላይ ቤዝ ያደርጋል ማለት ነው። Will your theory or data comes first? So are you going to develop for your problems a theory, then you can go for data, or you have data, then you can come to the theory case. So in such kind of cases, we can use the case we call as inductions or deductive methods. There are two methods, induction and deductives. Either you can start from general, you come to the theory case from the theory, or you can come to the general. So this induction and deduction methods comes here for your analysis case. Then, are you going to use the cross-sectional or longitudinal approaches for your studies? That means, are you going to check, you are looking one point at one time, or you are using some cross analysis for your data case? And how you are going to verify or falsify your theories? It's very important. At the end, you can verify that your theories are working. That means you can give the data, formulated theory based on some developed theories or from other data for your analysis case. Well, when we see about quantitative approach, in the case of, you can use that you are collecting, analyzing data numerically. Well, if you don't have if there is no numbers involved, if you don't have any numbers, you don't have no quantitative data. So you should focus on numbers. Numbers are very important on this case. Again, the analysis methods are using statistical methods. You can see on the next sections. Where here the data sources include, you can use some surveys or observation methods. Either you are using counting numbers, coding into numbers. Of course, you can use some of secondary data, well-published data from journals and others, or from government data, as we said in lecture 1 and 2, as it's mentioned. Okay, these are some of the cases. Either you can falsify or verify, that depends on how you are proven. Whether if it is false, you can prove that is false. Whether it is true, you can prove that it could be true. So that depends on hypothesis that starts from hypothesis testing. As you can see here, if you are looking here, you can see we have the truth, then we have decisions, how we are deciding. Okay, so that decision depends on your data. In order to decide, you should come up with the data. If your decisions are true, if your decisions are true, and if you reject that means you are in type 2 error. And if your decisions, if your values are true, hypothetically, then you reject that, what you call type 1 error. So in all cases, we can see which one is type 1 error and which one is type 2 error based on those cases. In order to analyze those data, quantitative data, we can see in detail later. You can use some static analysis with mean, median, and the mode. There are different distributions methods. We can use some skew, range, variance, and the standard deviations are the case which we can use. We can use analysis. Here you can use some of the correlation data and so on. As you can see here, the data easily can be correlated. We have horizontal cases, vertical is with horizontal and the vertical, X and Y axis, how you are analyzing or correlating the data. The correlations are correct or not, that depends on the cases. Okay. When you see about some of the examples, depends upon the H0, H1, and H2 cases, where how your analysis are working, how statically you can use the difference in knowledge, the gain, you are gaining some of the knowledge between experimental and the users. It will give you the data which your data are in a good lesson to the global cases, how you are using those cases. Okay. Of course, you can analyze those data, the data that depends on statistical tests, which we can see later those data. So in this case, as a researcher, you should focus some of the points. Is my sample is big enough? Your sample should represent your research. And have I used the correct statistical test? Not only the sample is big, but you can check about your data, your test should be correct. Then are you check your type 1 or 2 error? Type 2 error is, that means when your data is correct and you are rejecting. Type 1 error is that when your data is wrong but you are accepting. So you should check those cases. And is your method results, is that reproducible? Or am I measuring things right way? So you should check those cases. What's wrong? Something can't be measured or measured accurately. As we said, if it is quantitative research, you should measure. But if your data are not measured, that's wrong. Don't tell why then data can be statics. That means you can take some data as snapshot for a point at time. Can tell a version of the truth or lie. So these are the cases which you can remember case. In case of qualitative approach, any research that doesn't involve numerical data. If you don't have any numerical data, your research is qualitative research. That means instead use words, pictures, photos, videos, or some of the recording. Whenever you are interviewing people, they will give you some own words. You can, tends to start with some broad questions rather than a specific hypothesis. And finally, you can develop a theory rather than start with one as the case, as what we call as inductive and deductive. Please read inductive and deductive methods. How there are a ladder, daraja, how first step, second step, and so on. Please read inductive and deductive methods for your best classifications. Here, whenever you are gathering data, qualitative data, you should ask yourself how and why things happened. Okay, and rather than you are focusing on a large sample, you can compare data with quantitative methods and focus on respondents. They provide you, whether they provide you inaccurate or false information. If you collect some of the form, come up with that case, that is not good way. Then ethical issue is very important. As a researcher, don't use some falsified data for analysis. If you are doing some of the qualitative, that interview method or some group discussion or any methods, you should focus on real data, and that data, may address your objective to the case. The sources are focus group, questionnaires, interviews, secondary data, infography, and observations. Observations are very, very, very important case. Whenever we are analyzing qualitative data, we have content analysis, grounded social networking analysis, discourse, narrative, and the conversation case. Some of the examples as qualitative data cases. For instance, if you see these two pictures, you know, let us say these are the tour guides. The tour guides, you know, they are guiding people from one place to another as visitors, as tourists. You know, some are using some personal lead, and some are technology lead. Okay? When you query those things, it will give you. That means either you are using some data sources for questionnaire and for informal or informative way of the case. Whenever you are analyzing the data, you can compare two different things. Works at personal. What are the differences and the similarities? Addressing how it works. It works in those days. And the thematic analysis are how your participants are there, how you are interviewing, what are the user experience, opportunity of learning, other focus, and the findings are there on the case. As qualitative researchers, what worries you? What worries you? One is, have I coded my data correctly? Coding is very important. How you are formally, you know, transferring your data in the coding systems. The second one is that, have I managed to capture the situations? Is that realistic managed? How the context matters in terms of sufficient. Then finally, is my approach flexible or able to change? So you can focus on those cases. When you say about the wrong qualitative research approach, you know, it can't be repeated. You are repeating the systems whenever you are, you know, it can't be subjective. You are using, it should be objective situations. You can address your cases. Whenever any operation is invalid, so the validity depends upon your data, and either you can compare your data with scientific or previously published data. Then dependability, showing that the findings are consistent and could be repeated. Conformability, so the degree of or the extent findings are, you know, shaped in respondent, or credibility, transferability. So this, the truth, the trustworthiness should be very, very important. So whenever you are transferring the data, showing that the findings have applicability in other contexts. So you should check. The data should be confidence. So whenever you are collecting the data, tells your respondent that you are using this for instance, if it's academic, for academic purpose only. If so for public, but before you know publicizing the data, you should aware your correspondence, your respondents on those cases. Okay. As in general, qualitative data and the quantitative data are in this table format. Please go through those cases. It is a summary from maybe page 1 up to, from slide number 1 up to 33, which is easy. For instance, if the data is in form of words, we call it as qualitative. If it's in numbers, we quantitative. If the data are in instrument, qualitative. If the data are in questionnaire, we call as quantitative case. You can get all those data from those website. Okay. The second one is sample size determination. How can you determine your sample size? Okay. How you can determine your sample size. When you see these pictures, you know, this is a black oval, then we have again red. So the black one is, you know, the population in big. So the smallest one, the red one, is a sample. So in order to come to the sample, we have different methods, and this is to come up to that case. So in short, we have sample is subset of population. Population is a big, sample is in short. Let us in a class, maybe we have 40 number of students. So from the 40, we have maybe 5 women or 5 girls and 35 boys. So from this, let us say 1 or 2, 1 girls and 5 boys. So such kind of representation is that depends on your questions, how you are addressing your questions. Why sampling? Why you can't do your research without sampling? One thing is that whenever you are getting information about large populations, you can have less costs, okay? Less field time. If you want to do the population, for instance, the whole Addis Ababa city or the whole Adama or Awasa or Mekelle, whatever. If you do those whole, it's very difficult. But if you make some sample small, it will give you less field time. More accuracy, it could give you, or it can give you a better job on data collection. And you know, when it's impossible to study the whole population, you can use sample case. Then what is a targeting population? That is a population to be studied, to which the investigator wants to generalize his result case. Then we call a sampling unit when the smallest unit from the sample can be selected. The smallest from the sample, you can use the smallest units. Are a sampling frame means it's a list of all sampling units from which the sample is drawn. Okay. So sampling scheme means a method of selecting sampling units from sample frame. So these are the case. When we see we have 2 types of sampling, non-probability sampling and probability. Non-probability sample is conventional method. That means it's easy of access. If you have some populations from the population, if you are using some easily accessible sample, we call as convenient sample. Snowball sampling means friend of friend. Whenever you are getting data or collecting friend of friends, we call as a non-probabilistic sample. Or sometimes you call as purposive sampling. That depends on judgmental whenever you are judging the data. You choose why you think should be in this study. So that's kind of case purposive sampling case, or we can say quota sample is also another way of sample case. You know, whenever you have the probability of being chosen is unknown, you can go for non-probability of case. When we say about probability sample, it is random sampling. Whenever you are using a test of hypothesis, in such kind of cases, it depends on known probability being selected on the given situation. However, the probability of samples are, you know, the best way. When you see about the probability, it is the best way for representation case. When we see about the probability of sample, we have 5 methods. We have simple random sampling or systematic, stratified, multi-stage sampling, and cluster sampling. If you see example, for instance, this is, we have a number of names of people from 1 to 24 and from 25 to 48. If you are randomly choosing, let us say, look, you can choose 20, 40, 29, 27, whatever, randomly. If you are simple random, we call as simple random choosing. We don't have any condition cases. Or if you have table of random numbers, you can choose pick 2, 2, or 2, 7, 5, whatever, randomly. Systematic sampling is based on ratio. Systematic means based on ratio. The ratio between sampling fractions. How can you choose, for instance, girls from boys? Ratio with sample size. Look, you can choose Andrea, Jeremy, woman, maybe Antonic. So such kind of cases we choose. Systematic means from the size from the population we can choose sample size. Then cluster sampling, we call as a group of sample unit close to each other. Maybe you can choose by age group or education group or maybe language or whatever. You can make those in cluster way. If you see some of the villages are here, you may have some sections 1, section 2, section 3, 5, and 5. You can choose based on their clustering approach. Then stratified sampling and multi-stage sampling are also the same. One of the way which please read this case in condition case. Then whenever again you are choosing the sample, we could face errors. Okay, error which we have systematic error as well as sampling error. Systematic error means whenever you are collecting data, if you get inaccurate response, when the people are not giving you the accurate response, you may have some bias. Or again, you may have some sampling error whenever again you are choosing the sample. If it is the samples are not the right sample, you may have some random error. When you see these cases, we have type 1 and type 2 error, which earlier we mentioned, I think around slide 34 or 35 we already mentioned. You may have type 1 error or type 2 error that depends on the percentage. We see type 1 error as we mentioned earlier. If you have the probability of finding different with the sample compared to the populations. If you know as alpha, you may have type 1 error. If the probability of not finding difference that actually exists, we call as type 2 error. So when we usually we set 5% for type 1 error, and usually we set around 80% for power beta. Alpha, beta error. So in this case, based on that, whenever we are going to sample size, qualitative corner, n z square, sigma square over d square. If it is quantitative, if it's qualitative, we have n z square pi 1 minus pi d square, no? Or you can use in terms of frequency. Look, if you see one of the example, studies to be performed to determine certain parameters in the community. From a previous study, the standard deviation of 46 was obtained. Sigma 46, no matter. If the sample error up to 4 is to be accepted, how many subjects should be included in this study at 99% of confidence interval? Okay. So okay. Second one is also the studies to be done. Please go through these two examples. If you have any questions, we can discuss. Later. We have 3, or we have 4 already. So when we see about sample size determinations, one thing is that depends on the planning point of view. Are you going to do your new research or new study, or are you going to do your extension? That means research development in Falomat. If you have one research data, you can go already to the new one, or you can extend the old one. So in this case, how large sample do I need to be able to reject? You can reject or accept those data, which already I mentioned earlier. So in this case, we have 3 common situations for testing. We have one sample t-test and the paired t-test, or we have 2 sample tests, or we can compare P1 versus P2 with z-test. Okay, so in this case, we can see some of the normal distribution beta. We have Z1 minus beta. This is the percentile. If it is 1 tail or 2 tail, 1 tail cone, let us say 5% cone, we can use 5% crazy point or that. Or if it is 5% 2 tail, we can use divide 2.5 on both side case. So in this case, whenever we are using one sample t-test and the pair test, as you can see, we can have H0 mu times K versus H1 different from K. These are hypothesis tests. We can compare, is that type 1 error or type 2 error? Check. Then we have number of sample, n is number of sample, Z1 minus alpha over 2 plus Z1 minus beta, sigma square over d square. So here is one of the example to work on. Okay, we are interested in the size of sample from population of complete batching mix. We know that typically sigma is about 30 megapascal for these populations. The following table shows that the sample size for different levels of some of the factors include in equation for one sample t-test for difference between specified population, the mean and the true. So here, as you can see, we can check the tests for mean value given and the K condition. For instance, alpha 0.05 is our type 1 cases. And let us start with sigma 25. This is sigma የተሰጠው ስንት ነው? 30 ነው። Let us start this from 25. Okay. D is we have D means we have two mean አለ mean 1 and mean 2 ነው. Let us say D mean 1 and the mean 2 is 5. Power is 1 minus beta 1 beta. So let us take 80%, which is 0.8. If you insert in this equation, so if Z1 minus alpha over 2, if it is 0.05, if you go to Z1 distribution, normal distribution curve Z1 like the alpha over 2 means 0.05 over 2 is 0.025. Okay, Z1 0.025 from the table you can find 1.96 ታገኛላችሁ ማለት ነው። When Z1 minus beta, okay, beta from power beta 1.8, which is 0.842 ታገኛላችሁ ከቴብል ማለት ነው። If you multiply by sigma 25 square D5 ነው። ስለዚህ 197 ሳምፕል ቴስት ማድረግ ትችላላችሁ ማለት ነው። So the same is true. On sigma, let us say sigma alpha batch 25, sigma 25. Then ይሄንን በቴብል ውስጥ ባልኳቸው ኢኩዌሽን በቴብል ስታረጉት for 25 0.5 0.8 እያለ 0.8 ላይ at D5 ላይ 1.96 እዚህ ኢኩዌሽን ላይ ያገኛችሁት ይችላል almost the same ነው። if it is 30 283 ይመጣል። the same is true as slide number 74 calculate ስታረጉት 283 ይመጣል። በሰላ ላይ በስቲ ላይ 385 ይመጣል። ሶ ከ196 እስከ 385 ድረስ ያለውን በሙሉ ብትወስዱ it will satisfy your concrete batching case. If it's two-tailed tests, you can use N1 plus N2, where here we are using two means. ሁለት ሚኖችን እንጠቀማለን። mean 1 plus mean 2, mean 2 for two sample compare ነው የምናደርገው። sigma 2 እንደቀድሞ አለ። Again, you can check those with the same example as we have seen for earlier condition. So the same conditions works for those example. Same condition alpha check ስናደርግ ለምሳሌ 94.95 አካባቢ ነው። የቀድሙ ግን ስንት መጣን? 196 አካባቢ ነው ያመጣ ነው። Okay, so the same is true. ይሄንን ለቀድሙ ቼክ ማድረግ ይቻላል ማለት ነው። for it is 95 the sample at 0.8 1131 1139 እና ሌላው two sample proportion whenever we are giving proportion for two sample P1 P2 P1 difference P2 እንደዚሁ sample check እናደርጋለን። same example works እንደቀደሙ P1 እና P2 0.7 to 0.5 which is 20% and N 252 አካባቢ ነው የሚሆነው ይሄም በቴብል መልክ ታገኛላችሁ። ሌላው ሶስተኛው ፖርሽን ዳታ አናሊሲስ ነው። እንግዲህ ዳታ አናሊሲስ ፎር አናሊቲካል ስትራቴጂ which we can analyze the data. አላማው we can draw conclusion from those theory conclusion draw ማድረግ ነው። when you see about qualitative data analysis ላይ we have nine ነገሮች አሉ። we can check about field and study carefully. The second one is the data analysis can be stopped only with given information. Then you can check your accountability, giving accountable information for your analysis, and you can divide your data into small pieces as well as for the readers can understand. As we say, the process is inductive process, and you can compare your data with the build theories. You can analyze the negative case from the positive case, compare those conditions with the ground. Here, let's say we have whatever category 1, 2. Then you can use some of the patterns. Then you can draw your እንደዚህ በማድረግ when we say something is that you can focus on major points, give some of the expertise knowledge on those given points. And then don't use some personal observation, personal opinions. Personal will give you some biased case. Give codings, not personal related reflection in the margin. Sort and sift some of the notes. You can identify, elaborate, and examine general conditions for the ground theory analysis. Please read those ground theory analysis on your case. In the ground theories, first open coding. In this case, whenever you are coding, give the data, break into small parts. Compare if there is any similarity and different, and then explain those meanings by focusing who, when, where, how much, and ask the questions for the clear stories. And when it is action coding, sort between categories. So you can go for the categories, then confirm or disconfirm your hypothesis. If it is select coding conditions, you can check, you can add some additional data, support data for your analysis to work on. If you see this picture, it will give you clearly. Look, if it is open coding, you can give anything. If it is actual, you can group. From, for instance, 3 in 1 or 4 or 1 or whatever. If you select coding, you can select all those things in one, so that easily people can understand whether your analysis can be working in good manner. Whenever we are interpreting, you can triangulate your data. You have multiple data sources, sorting, or semi-structured interview. You can check the data. Either you can auditing by appropriate methods to the ground theories, or is the process appropriate, or Is there a linkage between the hypotheses? You can check those cases. As suggestions, if it is negative case testing, make rough hypothesis, conduct thorough research, then examine all those analysis cases. If it's cultural bias, discuss the cultural difference between the groups to see whether there is a divergence between cultural interpretations. Could be there. In general, you can check case-to-case translations, or you can use some relevant cases. That means from the particular set of results to the broader theories. The theory should be the broader concept to check. When we talk about quantitative data analysis, so that basically focus on summarizing data and then generalizing from a sample to the population. So whenever you are summarizing data, what is your variable? What is the variable? Which simple statistics methods you use, and how the models you are using those cases. As summarizing data, first you can look on the variables. Whenever you are using those variable is something that has different values on your test data. In the value can be numbers or names. Either you can use number or names. If it's numeric, you can use, for instance, weight can be numeric. Weight in kg. You may have some pounds and so on. For instance, if you are using counting, if the building collapse, what are the number of injuries? You are counting the case. Whenever you are using ordinals, competitive labels, values from numbers, names, okay, number 20. If you are using some number of injuries, maybe in building collapse 20, building collapse 40, you can compare those cases. If you are using some of nominals, names, values, sex, comparing male to female or woman to woman, whatever. So in this case, you should check those points, your numbers, distributions, other names to your data cases. So in this case, the probability comes, the normal probability distribution curves, the beta, alpha comes into pictures. Again, in statistics is also the numbering, summarizing the bunch of values. We have simple and univariate statistics. You can use some of the effective outcomes if whenever your variables are 2 or more. Then as you can use a mean. Mean is the average. If you have some 10 datas, you can sum those 10 datas divided by 10. You can use some of the average. You can use some of the standard deviations, and then standard error of the mean. You can use sample size, counting, ordinals. Again, whenever you are using the medians are most of the time the 50th percentile. If it's median, if quartiles, you are using 25th and 70th percentile. In this case, median means you can arrange the data in chronological order. And take the mean value for your condition. Okay. Then, if the sample of statistics are in nominal variable, you can use frequencies. Frequencies for statistical methods. Comparing one dependent variable, another independent variable. Okay. Let us say y is numeric, x numeric. You may have model test regressions like slope, intercept, correlations. If it is numeric normal, you can have t-test. If it is nominal, you can use t-square. If it's nominal numeric, you can use categorical tests for this. Please go through this table for your clarifications, okay? As an example, if it is numeric value, numeric, for instance, we have in vertical axis, we have body part, horizontal, we have sum of skin folds, okay? This is correlation, the correlation can be explained in a straight line. We are using somehow this as the model of this kind of case are linear regressions. When you see the effective statics is a slope, because the slope can give you the data and the intercept as parameter. When you see the correlation coefficient, variance, for instance, is 100 with correlation square as numeric. Then other statics, you can check what are the error, residual error, as well as what are the validity. Validity እዚህ ጋር ማሳየት ይቻላል in terms of the values. So if you see this value vertically, it will give you how you can. Second example is numeric versus nominal. Okay. This female and the male are nominal. This vertical axis are strengths. So in this case, what are the model tests? The model tests are t-test, two group row. Let's run a t-test. We have two tests. There's one-way ANOVA conditions. Then the effective tests are the difference between the means. Whenever we are comparing the mean between the two values, the percentile difference, if there is any fraction error, we can use. Whenever we are using the variance, that's explained in terms of percentage, okay? Other tests is root mean square testing to start ማለት ነው። ሶስተኛው when we see about in terms of the magnitude, whenever we are using the standard deviations, let us say we have two colors, we have blue and red. One is for males and female conditions. This is in trivial effect you can see, or in very large effect you can compare. You see the female and the male condition use the same condition. Effect of size, threshold values. When you see if it is trivial, we have 0 up to 0.1. If it's small, from 3, moderate up to 5, large 0.7, very large up to 0.9 and 1. Correlation. ያ ማለት ምንድን ነው? If your correlation values, for instance, R square is 0.9 ማለት በጣም አሪፍ ነው ማለት ነው። You are coming to the exact value. If the correlation is 0.5 or less ከሆነ the data የመረጣችሁ data represent አያደርግም ማለት ነው። Effective size is the same. Question is Hopkins suggested the values for the given range. ሌላው numerical nominalም እንደዚሁ we have strength test, pair test, ANOVA, we have effective test, change in mean, we have other tests within subjects and standard deviation. Please go through this comparison. እነዚህ ኮምፓሪዝኖች በጣም ወሳኝ ናቸው። እነዚህ ኮምፓሪዝኖችን በደንብ እያንዳንዶችን ይዋቸው። ሌላው ኖሚናል ነው። values which we can use model test, chi-square test ነው፣ contingency. effective test ለምሳሌ relative ነው፣ relative ratio between female to male ratio የምትወስዱበት ነው። relative risk ለምሳሌ 75 ለ30 or 30 ለመቶ the ratio on a relative risk calculate ብናደርግ ይሄ 75 ከመቶ ነው ይሄ 30 ከመቶ 2.5 አካባቢ if you are use odds ratio ብትወስዱ ይሄ 75 ነው ቀሪው 25 ነች ይሄ 30 ቀሪው 70 30 ለ70 or 75 ለ25 ዲዛይን ስናደርግ ይሄን ያክል ሳምፕል ሪፕሬዘንት ያደርጋል ብለን የምንወስደው ማለት ነው ሴም ስትሩ ሌላም ኤግዛምፕል አለ ይሄንንም ኤግዛምፕል አይዩት እናንተ ብዙ ኤግዛምፕሎች አሉ ያንን ሳቲስፋይ የሚያደርጉት ማለት ነው whenever we have seen some of the controlled trial tests we have እንግዲህ ለእያንዳንዱ ቴስት ለእያንዳንዱ ሳምፕል ሞዴል ቴስት ቼክ ታደርጋላችሁ effect in terms of statistics and other statistics እነዚህ ሶስቱ በጣም ወሳኝ ናቸው if they satisfy those value will analysis check ያደርጋል ማለት ነው okay so in each case you can check the probability that the probability that comes to the positive or negative that depends you know if the values are less than 0.5 or greater than satisfy የሚያደርገው check ማድረግ አለብን ማለት ነው so you can check about the standard deviation what are the overlap that depends on reliability ለምሳሌ probability 0.03 0.2 plus or minus ሲሆን correlation ምን ያክል strong ነው ወይስ correlation ምን ያክል strong አይደለም የሚለው so in short as summary you should check about the exact p value then the confidence limit should be checked again check the error in terms of mean and the magnitude of difference should be checked in that case then how can you present the data in the interpretation እንግዲህ ዳታ ፕሬዘንት የምናደርግበት either you can use table or graph በቴብል or graph ነው ዳታ ሪፕሬዘንት የምናደርገው okay data should be presented in table or graph and how we can interpret የሚለው በጣም ወሳኝ ነው when we see about the table is the simplest way to summarize data the data are presented as absolute number or percentage in the table ውስጥ ሲሆን when it is chart and a graph visual representations of data are presented as absolute or percentage of the case matter. So in this case, there are some guidance to use when summarizing the data. If it is ensure graph has a title, the graph title check label the components of your graph. Indicate source data with data or provide numbers and add some footnote ያስፈልጋል ማለት ነው ለምሳሌ this is a frequency distributions set of categories with numbers is this correct or not by the way you have here number of birds right so look this is not correct we should give the title እንደሆነ መጻፍ አለባችሁ let us say table 1 year versus number of birds የሚለው መጻፍ ያስፈልጋል ማለት ነው second one is relative frequency relatively also you can represent the data so relative frequency means number of values within the interval or total number of the table when you see about this let us say if it's 35 to the total number 132 is 27%, 46 to 130, 34, 51 divided by 132 is 39. If you sum together, so relatively check እናደርጋለን So here, look, the percentage of births decided between 1900 to 1929. Again, here you should make table 1.1 or table 2. Otherwise, it will not give you the given data. Charts and graphs are used to portray trends, relationship, comparison when you compare, or if you are giving some informative as a simple and self-explanatory, it will give us chart and so we have chart and graphs like bar chart. Bar chart kone lo comparison whenever you are comparing the data. Line graph kone demo it displays on trends. Trend ምን ይመስላል? If it is pie chart, it shows the percentage or proportional shareዎች ነው የሚያሳየው. As example, look, እዚህ ጋር ከሆነ ይሄ comparing the categories. We have, you know, green, red, and the blue compare ስናደርግ ማለት ነው. If you want to compare the categories, category compare ለማድረግ bar chart እንጠቀማለን. The same is true. ለምሳሌ new roles to the others compare ለማድረግ ማለት ነው. The same is true, okay? Then compare ለማድረግ, okay? ሌላው ደግሞ ስታከርድ ባር ቻርት እንደዚሁ ሆሪዞንታሊ እንደዚህ በማስቀመጥ ኮምፔር እናደርጋለን። ኮምፓሪዝን ማጠቀም ይችላል። ሌላው ላይን ግራፍ ዲስፕሌይ ትሬንድስ ቅድም እንዳልኳቸው አንዱን ከአንዱ ጋር the same year 1 year 2 እንግዲህ the same ዳታ በተለያየ መንገድ ማስቀመጥ ይቻላል ማለት ነው። ላይን ግራፍ ሌላው ፓይ ቻርት ደግሞ ኮምፔር ለማድረግ ከቶታል ፕሮፖርሽኑ ምን ይመስላል? ለምሳሌ 8% ከዚህ ቶታሉ 8% 10% percentage of all patients enrolled by quarter you can use as example whenever. ስለዚህ when we choose pie chart, Gantt chart or line correlation የሚለው check. Whenever you are interpreting the data, interpret ስናደርግ check the relevance of the data, finding the reason for finding, then consider other data and conduct further research. Interpret ማለት ያ ማለት አሁን ያለውን ዳታ እንገልጻለን. You can give some reasoning እናብራራለን or finding the future work recommend እናደርጋለን ማለት ነው. Okay, that means you can give information by making connection and comparison of exploring cause and consequence. Using some of the cause and the consequence, you can interpret data in terms of causes and then comparison on those data. So in the case of interpretation is, does the indicator meet the target? Check እናደርጋለን. Indicator targeቱን መጥቷል። How far from the target? ከታርጌቱ ምን ያክል ርቋል? How does it compare time period and other facilities? And are there any extreme high in the low data you can compare using those interpretation? ሌላው reason ስናደርግ what are the possible causes? You can in case supplement with expert opinions በማስቀመጥ ዳታውን እንጽፋለን ማለት ነው። Consider also other data, some routine service data, calculate relationships from one point to another. Again, interpret scenario, you can check situation analysis, demographic and health surveys, performance improvement should be there as a point. Here you can check the data gap, conduct ለማድረግ methodology, resources ሁሉም check ማድረግ. Here are the key message. ይሄ በጣም ወሳኝ ነው። ቴብል ስንጠቀም can display large amount of data ከሆነ ቴብል ተጠቀሙ. If you have large amount of data. If you want to use some visual or easier to detect pattern ከፈለገ graph or chart ነው የምንጠቀመው. If you labels the component of your graphs Then whenever you are interpreting data, add meanings by making connection. Meaning which is መጠቀም ያስፈልጋል። ሌላው የመጨረሻው ሪፖርት ራይቲንግ ምን ነው የሚያጠቃለው? ሪፖርት ራይቲንግ የሚያጠቃለው አንደኛው ሪፖርት ፎርማቱን ይመስላል፣ ቪዥዋል ዲዛይን፣ ላንጉዌጁ፣ ሶርስ ኦፍ ዶኩሜንቴሽን። ስለዚህ ኦርጋናይዜሽኑ ፈርስት ዩ ሹድ ሃቭ አብስትራክት ያስፈልጋል። then introduction and objective, background, methodology, procedures, results, discussion, conclusion and recommendation. እነዚህዎችን ሪፖርት ፎርማቱ ያስፈልጋል ማለት ነው። ይሄን እንግዲህ ባለፈው ሌክቸር 1 and 2 ላይ ገልጸናል። just for your cases. However, in abstract or sometimes executive summary, always comes first. መጀመሪያ ይመጣል። ይሄንን በፓስት ቴንስ ነው የምትጠቀሙት። ፕሊዝ ዶንት ፎርጌት። አብስትራክት always የሚጻፈው በፓስት ቴንስ ነው። one paragraph ነው፣ one page ላይ ነው የሚጻፈው። should be one paragraph and one page. The contents are state research problems or main objective ማጠቃለል አለበት። It indicates the methodology and present the main findings and the conclusions. Abstract ውስጥ መግባት አለበት ማለት ነው። should be must. Abstract and example is ጋር የተቀመጠ ያለ you can read those abstract. Introduction ደግሞ የሚያጠቃለው it explain the research problems and its context. It explain the importance of the problems. Why does it matter? It includes the application of the experiment. It explains the reason and the goal and the motivation. What motivated you to do this research? What motivated you to do this report? Background generally ማጠቃለል ያለበት the theory for the experiment and any equation is required for the calculations. Okay. Then write in complete sentence. For instance, the tank was filled with 5 liters of water. Fill tank with 5 liters. Look how the sentences are. Some of the sentences are complete, some are incomplete. Below. ቼክ እናደርጋለን። then ሪዛልቱ ምንድነው ማጠቃለል ያለበት? the result state the result in the text before presenting any graph or figures or table. ስለዚህ ግራፍና ቴብል ከማድረጋችን በፊት ቀድመን ነው ማብራሪያ ከጻፍን በኋላ ወደ ቴብልና ፊገር እንመጣለን። then indicate key trends, relationship, highlights, then visual representation አለ, graphs, tables. Again, use past tense. These are results you measured, calculated in the past tense. Language በጣም ወሳኝ። Discussion. Why did you observe what you observed? የሚለው እናስቀምጣለን። Explanation of the results, comments or unexpected result or any finding ካለ እሱን እናደርጋለን። Then you can compare comparison to the literatures. Does your research confirm previous studies? Compare እናደርጋለን እዚህ በዲስከሽን ውስጥ ማለት ነው። Coming to the conclusion ላይ what was learned through the research? ምንድን ነው ያደረግነው? What is the strength and the weakness of the study? then recommendation እዚህ ውስጥ እናደርጋለን ማለት ነው። ዲስከሽን ውስጥ recommendation ላይ what would you do differently ሌላ ሰው differently የሚያደርገው ነገር ነው any change would recommend for experiment የሚለው እናደርጋለን ማለት ነው ስለዚህ visual design graphics ነው should be used to illustrate specific points should be explained fully in text using reference figure ላይ እናስቀምጣለን textual information before graphics እናስቀምጣለን ማለት ነው so as an example እነዚህ graph ላይ ተቀምጧል እነዚህ graphically ማድረግ አሁን ቴብል የተቀመጠውን ፎርም ይሄ ነው ይሄን ወደ ግራፍ ላይ እንደዚህ መጻፍ ይቻላል እንግዲህ ፊገር ላይ እዚህ ለማስቀመጥ ፊገር ከስር ነው የሚቀመጠው ካፕሽኑ ቴብል ሲሆን ደግሞ ከላይ ይቀመጣል ማለት ነው ይሄ ሌላው ቴብልና ፊገር ሁለቱን በአንድ ላይ አናስቀምጥም the same information convey ማለት የሚያደርገው ወይ ቴብል ነው ወይ ፊገር ነው ለብቻ የምናስቀምጠው እንግዲህ language and vocabulary ስንጠቀም report should be easily accessible መሆን አለበት be straightforward and concise use simple terms not jargon መጠቀም የለብንም keep sentence short and simple 20 words maximum ከዛ መብለጥ የለበትም no common phrases like in the blank in the ballpark not close like pretty roughly የለት ቃላቶችን መጠቀም የለብንም ማለት ነው እንግዲህ ሶርስ ዶክመንቴሽኖችን ቻፕተር ነው ሌክቸር ማለት በደንብ አይተናል ፓራግራፎችን ሳይት ስናደርግ እንግዲህ ዶንት ኮፒ ማድረግ አንችልም ኮት ዳይሬክትሊ is discouraged ዳይሬክትሊ ኮት ማድረግ የለብንም you can use some passive voice ላይ ተጠቅመን መጻፍ አለብን ማለት ነው ሶርሶቹ እንግዲህ እነዚህ ናቸው ባለፈው እንዳወራ ነው እንግዲህ ሳይቲንግ ስናደርግ you can give acknowledgement for those researcher ለሰራው acknowledgement እናደርጋለን so you can protect you from accusation of plagiarism protect እናደርጋለን ማለት ነው these are some of the reference in the case እንግዲህ ሪፖርት ኮንዳክት ስናደርግ ቅድም ያየናቸው ሪፖርቶች አሉ እነሱ ሁለት መንገድ ነው አንደኛው ኳንቲቲቭ ሪፖርት ነው ይሄ report results by the use of table and the graph ከተጠቀማችሁ ኳንቲቲቭ ነው avoid first person pronoun እና use passive voice no ለኳንቲቲቭ ከሆነ የምንጠቀመው ማለት ነው ኳሊቴቲቭ ከሆነ look for deep and varied description narrative style look for well ground theory እና seek contextual like underground method ነው so with this you can read those in detail all are explained in PPT form and I wish you all the best please go through don't forget to subscribe this Argawasha YouTube and like and share thank you so much በጣም አመሰግናለሁ መልካም ጊዜ